Hello, everyone. In the interest of time, we've made a quick, agile modification to the program. So rather than the final panel, which was scheduled for 45 minutes, Mario and Jonathan and I are just going to make a few kind of closing remarks, questions, observations, and we will end on time at 5 o'clock in 15 minutes so that we can excuse people who need to catch planes, trains, and automobiles and start with the lightning talks for the people who are staying, okay? Does that work for everybody? All right, and I know a lot of people are already leaving, so with that, and feel free. So I've been sitting here for 2 days listening to fascinating talks with one question in my mind, which is, what do I do? You know, I am an administrator, I run a library, I have a lot of ideas about things we could do to support this shift in scholarship and support the kinds of assessment we've been talking about, but, you know, it shouldn't be up to me. So I want to ask the audience, either right now or just over the next, you know, few weeks, be thinking about what it is that the library at an institution could do most effectively to really support and help with this transformation. Victoria.
So I have an idea. I'm not trying to give you personally anything to do. So so one thing that I run into is we don't know how to evaluate your work, right? Which has kind of been the theme. Which has really kind of been the theme over the last 2 days. So one thing that just popped into my mind is maybe there's a role for librarians or sort of the library structure in collating and aggregating some of this work in an sort of like if there's an easy recommendation letter or something you could give out that does a summary like this and provides a way to evaluate the work. I don't know whether people would listen, but that's something that is tangible that I could give to committees that may actually be something that they would look at.
And so you're talking about guidelines, examples?
I'm talking about Mackenzie Smith saying, this is what we think of Victoria. Like really concrete. I mean, obviously not. I mean, it'd be in the right institution and so on. But if there was something like that, say at Columbia, where Columbia librarians could provide a synopsis and something coherent and managed and like a package that describes some of these alternative types of contributions in a coherent way, maybe it's something I work on with them or I sort of explain the context, then that's something that can go into that package, like a letter of recommendation to allow committees to do a better job.
People seem compelled to go on anyway. And so say, I don't know anything about it, but hey, you know, I say, I'll flip a coin. You know, I think Victoria's suggestion is very good, but even just getting people to stop.
I don't think I can do that, personally.
Well, Victoria's suggestion is that write a letter.
All right, well, that's certainly something that we could start thinking about. In the back?
A slip of the tongue, but did you say fellowship as opposed to scholarship a little moment ago?
I didn't, but that's an interesting idea.
No, but that's what I heard. And you know, one thing of the library, you know, you know, universities were founded around libraries. You know, that's where the books were held. That's where now a lot of the interactions was the book, was the written. Whereas now you know, the knowledge is created together, it's constructed, and if the library could serve that role to promote that sort of collaborative wrestling with ideas in an informal but curated manner, that you know, just these ideas are there, you're pushing things forward, it's below the radar. But it is not necessarily production. It's not a publication, but it could emerge. It's beyond the preprint or before preprint. You know, it's just that early stage interaction. I don't want to call it brainstorming, but it's really bringing scholarship, different ideas together, and creating a framework or a rubric of how some idea could be tackled given the resources of the local institution.
Yeah, I just had a short comment. I'm a recent PhD humanities graduate here, and it seems to me that there's a little bit of hero worship or valorization of faculty going on, and so, you know, like a couple things. I think that for P&T, like one of the major things that we need to consider is that, you know, the structure is pretty clear. This is what you need to do. And it's also clear what doesn't count, and some of those things should be counted, and I think those conversations are really valuable. We did a project with DHR where we went up to Calaveras County, and we did a film that showed on the local PBS channel, and some of the community and human development professors came out and did some projects, and some geologists or geographers, and they said, we know that this isn't going to count for tenure. This is definitely a social service project, but it was fun and that's great, and they kind of complained about it, and those are some of the things that we should really look at. But you know, I was a graduate student for the past 6 years, and I saw, you know, one of my faculty members fail to get tenure and one succeeded, and it was an interesting process to watch her specifically in the Technocultural Studies department, kind of stumbling, getting grants, going with her film, getting it on PBS, extending the film, getting a bigger grant, spending all summer working on it, and sort of like TAing for her, and then coming back and taking a class and seeing this project in all these different stages, and she really made tenure, and it was a great story, you know, and she's also a disabled person, so that's kind of a fun aspect to it. But I think, you know, faculty are kind of like notoriously like disorganized and kind of like, well, we're faculty, we're above reproach, we're thinkers, and we're researchers, and it's kind of like, we've been on the other end of, you know, having been in industry and having been out in the nonprofit world and in the government world, and then having to work with professors that are completely discombobulated, totally disorganized, you know, not using workflows. And this is the humanities. I'm not specifically addressing the sciences because there's so much that we can learn from that about computation and all these different things. But it needs to be said that, like, professors can improve the way that they go about this, their management tools and all of these things, so they catch up to speed to regular life and kind of like use a calendar and all the basic things that need to be done, like, in order to survive in this world. And if tenure is part of your goal, then like you need to plan for that. It's 7 years. You know, and that type of thing. So let's not just completely valorize this whole thing and say we're so above reproach, right? So that's, you know, I'm hoping to get a job. I hope I haven't offended anyone.
Puneet, and then we'll move
Do you
on.
want to keep going, or one more, and then?
Yeah, I have a quick response to Mackenzie's prompt about, I guess, what specifically librarians can do and what libraries can do, which, to a certain extent, I hope it's not too obvious, because it's something that it's already in the core of a library's function is curating, just both discovering, curating, and managing knowledge. And when faculty are creating, or any scholar associated with the university is creating new knowledge in a way that is non-traditional, if it's on a blog, if there's some other remnant from it, if there's a YouTube video, et cetera, where that might not be picked up in the traditional metrics, the libraries have a place, and they already serve a function to highlight what faculty are doing. And I think libraries are generally very good about that. And when it's alternative, or when what faculty are up to, not everything has a tangible residue. Mentorship doesn't necessarily leave behind something that libraries can archive and curate. But certainly there is a lot of tangible material left behind that libraries can say, and I think they often do, check out graduate student X's blog, Professor whatever's YouTube channel. And those things add up, and it brings it more into the mainstream so that it's something that everybody's familiar with.
Yeah, so I would characterize that as expanding the scholarly record, the official record, and that links to what Victoria was talking about, which is being able to tell you what you did because of what we were able to collect and capture and preserve for you.
Exactly.
Puneet, you're it.
Yeah, so this is a slightly different twist on what libraries can do, possibly, and maybe it's a picture of the library of the future, which is really the changing face of scholarly record, and I don't know what the term would be, but it's not a record. So it's something that's dynamic. Completely, as not a scholar of libraries at all, my observation has been that libraries are typically places of archival. They have static stuff that has been published, and then you go there and look it up. There seems to be a sort of a divergence or a trivergence between three groups on campuses usually. The libraries, the actual disciplines, the departments where professors, researchers are doing stuff with data on a daily basis, computing, analyzing, whatever, and groups that are usually called like Center for High Throughput Computing or High Performance Computing, et cetera, who have the horsepower to analyze this stuff. And sometimes the departments and these centers collaborate, but libraries are usually not in the loop at all. Libraries could potentially change their role to include this kind of dynamic data. Even now when I hear about libraries adding capacity for data archival, it's really about archival, DSpace or Fedora. As a researcher or a scientist, I don't want DSpace. I want data that are alive. I want data that are powered by my application or by my database. Not everything can be, made into a zip file and put on a server somewhere. I have maybe geographic data, I have time series data, I have streaming data. Libraries need to be somewhere in there. For example, I'm working with a group that's doing data mining. And they have run into a problem because they're trying to analyze about 500,000 articles. And the library does not have a static cache of those articles because they are subscribing and not actually purchasing those articles. So it's a completely silly, legal, arbitrary restriction which slows the progress of science, right? I mean, you have the capacity to analyze 500,000 articles in maybe a day, but some contractual restriction maybe restricts you to reading an article per minute, and it'll take you about 300 weeks to, analyze those articles. There is no rhyme or reason why libraries can serve as caches of these kinds of things in conjunction with the computer science or whatever the Center for Computing might be, and provide this service to the researcher who is not then trying to replicate it with a couple of servers and a couple of graduate students. So that's something to think about. That is really the changing face of library in the current environment.
Yeah, thank you. I need to move on to other speakers here, so.
Not really. I'll just, can I just ask a comment about this? So I'm down the road in this thing called the Met Center, and we have no idea what happens out here. I mean, honestly, I'm usually blocked.
Oh,
thanks.
recording.
Oh, sorry. I mean, where's the role of the library in being, a repository of current data and current thought to create those networks across a broadly distributed campus so that people who should be thinking outside of their comfort zones find out what other people are doing and stumble upon those things?
I think you're preaching to the choir. I see that very much as the role that we need to take on, and we have begun to do that in limited ways, but I need, validation that this is a helpful direction for the kinds of things we were talking about, providing you with more access to novel kinds of research, not the traditional books and journals, but all these other kinds of things like databases and data sets, and then building those networks, because we are interdisciplinary and we're everywhere, so we can be that substrate if you want that.
I think it's hugely important to have that sort of air traffic control position across an institution that is so diverse and, whether we like it or not, siloed. And I think the library seems perfectly situated to serve that role, and it seems mechanistically the challenge is to figure out how to do that in creative and efficient ways.
Okay, then I will ask the question I wanted to ask the crowd, which is, how do we do that? I mean, so what we're hoping to keep people engaged after this meeting, and we have ideas about how to do that. We're certainly going to publish and share information that came from the meeting and all the links and all the slides that people share and the recordings of the talks and everything else that we can do. But how do we, there are people who aren't reaching out to find, such, new forms of scholarship or, where the hidden data is, et cetera. What do we need here on this campus, for example? Do we need more courses for graduate students? Do we need workshops for the medical school? What exactly do people think would help in terms of bridging those gaps and making those connections and getting everybody on campus to do new, interesting forms of scholarship? All right, there you go.
Yeah, so it seems to me of what I heard today, today and yesterday, is historically the library was the center of the campus, or one of these centers that everybody went through. Now Google Scholar is the center, and the library is on the edge. But the library, the university library today may no longer be the center. The center may have been moved somewhere else where it was never before, and now you're part of the edge. So if you're part of the edge, that's a different strategy. I mean, I think of a smartphone. Smartphone is on the edge, and in the cloud is the cloud computing. In that sense, you're now on the edge. And are you just redundant or on the edge? What do you do? My dad was the director of a library, and he passed away, and he went through the first stage of the bringing in of the terminals, and then he decided to become an antiquarian. But I think this is really, how do we conceptualize the library today when the center appears to be in the cloud?
Let's have a whole meeting just about that.
We got to wrap up. Do you have any final?
So actually, this was a great conference. I've learned a lot. I also have learned this is the first time in my life where we kept to schedule. In the social sciences, we don't do that. But Mackenzie is going to, she's the enforcer, and I love it. So thank you. The only thing, speaking as an observer, I was struck by how few arguments have actually happened. So it looks like the group here has decided that we know who the bad guys are, the Elsevier's, blah, 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 blah. Oh, sorry. I saw somebody with the Elsevier. Yeah, hi. I feel your pain being... they train them well to pretend that they're friendly. So what I mean is this. There was very little discussion about, possible competition between some of the platforms, some of the models of publication that have been discussed. So I don't know whether this is because everybody feels that this is kind of the beginning of kind of a long process, and so it's important to simply float things and see where they go, or are you guys too polite? So that's the question. But I guess that you don't have time to answer it because Mackenzie is going to pull the switch.
So we are going to keep to schedule here. We are going to wrap up and take a couple-minute break and then set up the lightning talks for those people who want to stay to hear some really cool, short, remember that, lightning talk people, short talks on a few really interesting connected topics to the meeting. But I want to thank everyone for participating. I want to thank Mackenzie and Mario, and in particular Allison in the back as our guru in more ways than one, and hope that you will stay engaged in this topic. Thank you.